Hi everybody, welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. I was sitting outside a restaurant in Studio City a few nights ago waiting to meet an old friend for dinner, and I happened to overhear, because you couldn't help but overhear, a young man who appeared to be in his late 20s explaining to the other four people at his table the many reasons that we did not, in fact, actually go to the moon. Some of the shadow angles don't match up, you see. Also, there are the impassable Van Allen radiation belts to consider. And there was no dust cloud when the lunar module landed and then took off. These were the mistakes that the hoaxers had made, apparently. But ultimately, he explained the reason we never went to the moon in the first place is because we've never gone back. If we actually went to the moon when we didn't have sophisticated computers, he asked, why don't we simply go back any time now that we do? Well, I could have answered him about the distortion effects of wide-angle lenses, and I could have answered him about the rapid transit in shielded spacecraft through the Van Allen belts, and I could have explained that without air, there's nothing to hold up a dust cloud as there is here on Earth. But the one thing I didn't have the heart to explain to him was the fact that we haven't been back to the moon in 46 years is because we have become, as a nation, as a people, as stupid and weak-minded as he is. Now, this is something new to Western civilization anyway, although it was probably painfully familiar to observers of the late Romans and the late Greeks and the late British Empire. This isn't ignorance. Ignorance is the lack of knowledge that is yet to be obtained. And what we're seeing in the moon landing conspiracy types and 9/11 conspiracy types and all the rest are not people speaking from ignorance of knowledge as yet unobtained. They're speaking about things that we already know, and they're not so much forgetting as they are unlearning. We live in the age of the great unlearning, a time when more and more people simply walk away from the library of hard-won knowledge and achievement because they're bored with it. In the age of the 2-minute attention span, it's much harder to actually learn about what it takes to go to the moon, of the 400,000 people who worked for NASA in those golden years, of the engine and rocket and spacesuit designs won through applied intelligence and trial and error, of the missteps and lives lost in burning capsules and training accidents, of the actual intensity and duration of the crossing of the Van Allen belts, or of how the lack of atmosphere makes fine dust spray like water and actually produces the best visual evidence that we actually were on another world. A person who believes that a bent shadow on a photo taken with a fisheye lens overrides the idea that 400,000 employees, plus the Russians, are in on a giant conspiracy that could put a Saturn V rocket into orbit 13 times, but somehow can't accomplish the extra 2% energy needed to get to the moon, well, that person's not ignorant. He's not stupid. He's unlearned what he and everyone else once knew. He's bored, and he wants attention, and he doesn't want to have to do any actual work to get it. A growing society demands libraries for the education and enlightenment of its people. A healthy society is one where trips to the library are commonplace. A decaying society is one where abandoned libraries are looted and the only things not stripped out of it for resale are the books. And just because the library now fits in the palm of your hand doesn't mean we haven't abandoned a trip to the library now that the library consists of just pushing a button. So what do we do about all this? Well, first we have to get a handle on the problem. The problem's not stupidity, it's boredom, it's laziness. And finally, it's this. It's a society of spectators rather than doers. How many times have I seen video of brutal fights or assaults or horrific injuries or some other catastrophe and watched screaming two-legged chimps holding up their smartphones to be the first person to video it and then post it on YouTube instead of getting in there and helping somebody? How do we resist this temptation to record things instead of actually experience them? And what do we do about things like this? You know, right after the shooting of Cecil the Lion, this picture made the rounds of the internet. It's a picture of Steven Spielberg posing with a life-size fiberglass replica of a Triceratops on the set of Jurassic Park. Now, someone interviewed young people in Britain about this picture and asked what they thought about big game hunting. And the young people were shocked and outraged. Those that recognized Steven Spielberg expressed disappointment in him for committing such a horrible crime. And what's remarkable about the answers, which were edited for effect, obviously, was the fact that almost everyone knew that that was in fact a dinosaur, but you could see them doing mental gymnastics to try to find a way to believe what they were seeing. Was that a rhinoceros? In other words, They knew, on some level, they knew that it was a dinosaur, and on some level they also knew that dinosaurs were extinct. But what society demanded of them right now was outrage over the killing of a large animal, and that's what society got from them as they unlearned in real time on camera everything they knew in order to achieve the desired emotional response. In other words, critical thinking, the ability to confront the picture with what they knew about the facts, namely that this photo cannot be what it appears to be since dinosaurs are extinct. Well, critical thinking's never been taught to them. Young people today, and millennials in particular, have only been taught what to think and never taught how to think. So how do we fix that? Well, all I can say is one person at a time. We handed off entire generations to a public school system that we knew was becoming ever more politicized as it became ever less effective at, actually educating people. We simply have to go out there and relearn these people. Mythbusters, for example, did an incredibly effective job at debunking those people that think the lunar landing was a hoax. It's one shining example of us taking responsibility for our laxity over the last 4 decades. Homeschooling, charter schooling, and all the rest, those are great options too, but ultimately, we have to face up to the ugly fact that it's the parent, not the child, that pays for the smartphone camera that's turned us into a nation of watchers and not doers, that it's the parent and not the child that parks kids in front of Xboxes and iPads instead of taking them to museums and field trips, and that it is incumbent upon all of us, me included, to resist the temptation to just sail into these unlearned children with the wrath of those of us who struggle for precious knowledge against those who have wantonly wasted it, and then patiently and gently explain to them the greater miracles that they have closed their eyes to in this great unlearning.